Hello, welcome to the video 4. This is going to be a fun project for easy email or phone messaging pop-up thingy. So let's go ahead and get right into this. This is one of my little fun projects that I try to do every week, which I've failed miserably at because I've been doing other stuff. But this is a little fun project. I've done a couple in the past. Someone was having a little bit of an issue doing something similar to this in the Slack channel. I thought it would be fun, quick little, maybe reusable widget blueprint type thing. And what I'm going to do is cover how I created it, how it works, and then of course the link to the source code will be below for anyone who wants to reuse it. The video is a little more free-flowing and free-form because honestly, I can't remember half the things I did most of the time, and we will figure them back out when we go over the video. So let's go ahead and hit play and see how these work. I've got two objects here. One on the left is kind of like a little PDA or a phone, and the one on the right is meant to represent like a computer. So the intention is when you walk up to it, it gives you a little notification that you can interact with it. And if you hit the interact button, which I've set up to the E key, pops up a little email window like Gmail or something with some email subjects on the left. When you click on them, it pulls the email on the right side. And I don't know if you noticed, but it also is bolded and italicized, and when I click on them, they switch to show I've read them. So something like you might see in your standard games where you get a little bit of interaction for storyline. And of course, when you walk away, it doesn't show interact anymore. And if you're not aiming at it, I don't know if you can hear it, but the interact button isn't working until I actually aim at it and I interact with it. So I have the same thing over here basically. Except you'll see the interact is in a different space. It's kind of like a little, because it is actually a 3D text in screen space. And when I interact with this one, it pops up kind of like a phone where you have a little text message with a little bit of text back and forth. Someone saying, hey, I need help. Someone replying, and then someone else replying back. So let's go ahead and see how I set this up. So what I did is I created two little widgets that are fairly similar, just slightly different because one is more interactable with the button clicks, and the other one is more of just for display purposes. But what I tried to design them was where they are two little blueprints here, and you can drag and drop them in to the scene, and then basically they're designed where they have components. Let's go ahead and let's move this one over here to make it a little bit easier. And let's rotate the whole thing. Okay, so there's our blueprint itself. You have this outside cube, which represents the volume when the player gets inside of that cube. The notification text pops up. You have the notification text itself, which basically is what they'll see. And then you have this inner volume, which represents our hit target for our line trace for what the actual interactable object is. So if you notice over here, basically, I have it where this little interactable portion is in front of the computer monitor, and our interactable portion is on top of our phone. And then the text here is kind of angled so it pops up and looks cool. And this one's in front of our monitor, so it walks in front of it. Now, since we're using a blueprint, the nice thing is, if I click on our blueprint, all of our individual components are all here, and they can all be actually edited in real time. So our text renderer can be moved as needed. Our interactable collider object, of course, can be moved and resized as needed. And then our message collider, which is our pop-up for the text itself, can be changed as needed as well. So if we go and run this, you'll notice I've changed it and it's all set up. And of course, you know, because it's all set over here, this can be changed to, you know, we can say push me. We can change our color to a red color, and then we can hit run, and you can see push me with like a darker red. So that's the basics of how I set it up. So I wanted it to be completely separate than your actual static mesh is, so that way you can more of design your system, design everything how you wanted it for your level layout, and then you just drop these on top of your areas and then conform them as needed. Keep in mind, this is just a fun little project. This is not designed to be an end-all solution. There are multiple things you can do, and that's the point of giving out the code and showing how I did this. So let's go ahead and look at the code and see what we did. So for this example, I used the default first person, which are these two folders here. You can go ahead and ignore them for the most part. One change I did do is in the first person character. What I did in our event graph is I created an interact event. Basically, when we push our input action for interaction, it goes ahead and it does a few things. But in order to do that, it requires a little bit of setup. So obviously in our project settings, under input, we have our action and access mappings. And I just simply went ahead and made a new interaction, action, interact, action for the E key. And that was it. That right there gives me my input action interact node. What we did next was we went ahead and we checked our capsule component on our player and checked to see who we are overlapping with, because I want to see which volumes we're overlapping with, which is our trigger volumes for our interaction, which is these volumes here. And what I do is for each of those, I check to see if it implements the interface called interactable, which is, as soon as I can find it, here we go, which is going to be in our blueprint editor. And we're going to see that they are set up as interactable. And interactable is nothing. It is simply a blueprint interface that holds an interact with object messaging so that way we can easily talk to something that we want to interact with. So I clicked on the wrong one. Let's go back to here. So if it is interactable and it is true, what we do is we do a line trace for interactable. Because we want to make sure, like I showed, that let's say you walk into here and you can interact, but let's say there's a computer here and a cell phone here, and you want to be able to interact with both of them, but it seems silly to have to arbitrarily, okay, well, maybe if I come in from this angle, I can interact with this one. No, it does a line trace to interact with the thing in front of it. And that's pretty simple. It's a little function I put right here. And what it does is it gets the camera, casts out 500 from where the camera's at in the forward vector, does a line trace by channel for a custom channel, and this is important, and then if it hits it, it returns it. So that's one of the things I did to try to reduce the amount of computation and to actually make it pretty simple to work. So if we look at our blueprint right here, which is why I had this popped up, and we look at our interactable object collider, and we scroll down to our collision matrix right here, we find a collision preset called interact object, which needs a description because I was too lazy to put one in. And if we look at it, what you're going to see is it ignores everything except for this interactable trace where it blocks it. Well, if you think to yourself, I don't have an interactable trace response, you would be correct. What you do is you go into your collision settings in your project. And if you notice down here, you have presets. Well, you won't have the interact object preset because I created that. And you won't have the trace channel called interactable. So that's something I learned that works out great when you actually want to make sure you are only hitting things that you want to hit. You want to use custom trace channels. And they're really simple. Hit new trace channel. Name your trace channel called awesome. And let's say what our default response is. Do we want this awesome channel to block, be ignored, or overlap? And then you hit accept. And that creates your new awesome channel. Now, here's one of the keys here. If you notice by default I set it to block. You might not want to do that. What that's going to do is it's going to take all of your existing channels here, add it in as a new trace type, and set it to block. Considering it's a new channel and it's a custom channel, probably for a custom use, I'd recommend setting this to ignore. That way all of your existing ones will completely ignore your new channel and you won't have to change any of your existing traces. And then what you do is you go in, you create a new preset, and we'll call this one my awesome preset. And then you go ahead and set what type of collision it is. So like for this one, I was just doing line traces. So we're just going to do a query. What it's going to query against, which was a static object. Set in a description if you want, if you're not lazy like me. And then you can go in here and you can go ahead and change it so awesome will block. So let's say for this one, I want to go ahead and set this to query only, and then I want to ignore everything except for awesome. And then there you go. There's your new awesome channel set up, where basically anything that looks for awesome stuff is only going to get by awesome flagged channels. And that's it. That was how I did to create a custom channel called Interactable with my custom preset called Interact Object. And that's it. So now, for example, this one was set up as that interact, which basically it's only going to work with your interact object. That means when I'm doing my line trace right here, it's only going to get affected by anything that's interactable. Ignore everything else, and it's only going to say, yes, I hit something I can interact with, and then we're good to go. I'll say, yes, I can interact with it. It is an interactable object, and we're going to say, okay, Mr. Object, go ahead and do something. And that's what our interface is for, and then it tells our item we want to interact with that you should be interacted with. So that's how we basically take our walking in, pushing our button, and interacting with our object. So for our object itself, we'll work with the email one. So this is our email one, and we have, if you noticed in here, a few different things that I haven't commented yet. So I'll go ahead and comment these, and that's going to be commented once we get the once you see the code itself. So it's pretty simple. In our begin play, I'm just simply hiding our text, our interaction text. Pretty simple. Then we have our begin and end overlap, which is intended when we overlap with it to show or hide our text visibility. So when we overlap it, it shows our text, and then it tells this widget it can now be interacted with. Because you need to keep in mind, if we are playing and we are here, but we are outside of it, we want to make sure our interact button does nothing. So that's what the interactable bool does. And the unoverlap, basically when we leave, is intended to make sure we hide it. We make sure we kill any widgets we have on our screen, just as a precaution. Because, for example, maybe you want it where you can, in my example, I walk up and I interact, and my input no longer works. I can't move, and nothing works except for closing. But maybe you want to make it where you can interact, but still move around. So you want to make it when you walk away, you not only close your text widget, you close any other widgets you have open to make sure that they're not stuck on screen. And that's pretty simple. You just basically, if you take a variable and you assign it to itself right here, well, what I'm doing here is I take our widget, I see if our widget is equal to nothing. Basically, if there's no widget already on our screen. And if that's true, I do nothing. But if we have a widget on the screen, I need to destroy it. So I just remove it from the screen. I assign our widget to nothing. If you notice right here, if you set it to something, it's going to set the value. If you set it to nothing, where it still shows select asset, it's going to basically null out that variable, and it's going to assign it to nothing. And then I go ahead and set our input mode back to game only and hide our mouse cursor, so that way we can actually move our character again. And as you notice, it works fairly well. We walk up, we look around, we interact. When we close this, we can now walk around again, and it hides and shows as we need it. So that's what our overlapping is set up for, basically showing and hiding our widget. Now, when we actually interact with our object, this is when we display our email or text. So again, we just do a sanity check. Do we have a widget currently on our screen? If we have a widget on our screen, we need to do one thing. If we don't have a widget, we need to do another thing. So, if we have a widget on our screen, is our widget equal to nothing? True, create. So, this is where comments come in. Do we have nothing on the screen? And it makes it easier. So, do we have nothing on the screen? True. Create a widget. False. Destroy the widget. So, let's go ahead and go with the first time we interact. Do we have nothing on the screen? True. Go to the next one. Can we actually interact with it? Yes or no? remember we set interactable somewhere up here when we actually walked into the screen. So we want to make sure it's actually usable. These are sanity checks. You'll find after programming for a while, sanity checks are great. So yes, can we do it? Next thing we do is we create the email pop-up widget. I'll cover how that works in a second. Now here's something that you may not see when you normally create a widget. So for example, let's say we do create widget. And let's say we're creating let's just go with user widget. You'll notice the only thing it shows is the owning player reference. But when I create my widget, you'll notice it actually has an input for email. Well, that's something that you can actually expose, and it makes it great for passing along variables when you create your widget. And I'll cover that shortly. So we create our email widget here, and we pass along an array of emails. Now I'll show you about those in a second. And then we set our widget to our widget variable, put it on our screen, and then of course change our input mode to only show the interaction. And then our last thing here is we're binding to a custom event called close clicked, and then we're binding that back to our interact with object. Our close clicked is on our widget, our email widget. So let's go and pull that up here somewhere. Email pop-up. This is our close clicked. So basically when we click on this, it's going to go ahead and call this event, and it's going to call interact with object again. And that's why we have our check right here. So we have one event that basically handles opening and closing this widget. So when we close it, we're doing what we did earlier. We're removing it, setting it back to nothing, and giving control back to the player. So hopefully that's pretty simple. And with more comments, hopefully if you get lost, it'll be pretty easy to understand. But basically we're creating and destroying our text to show that we can interact with the object. And then we're creating or destroying the widget itself on the screen, and then listening for the close button to be clicked. So how does our email pop-up work itself? The nice thing is I tried to separate the widgets out into sections so that way you can customize everything you want. This is your email pop-up widget. Everything is customizable in here, and the key is 2 scroll boxes. A header scroll box on the left and a content scroll box on the right. And all this does is it will hold your headers and your content of your email, which can be customized again however you want it. If you notice, there's no headers or scroll content in here. They will be added later programmatically when you click on them, which allows you to customize how you want your headers and content to look. So this is pretty simple. It's just a UMG with a layout. I have a little button here with an on-click event, which is right here, which basically calls our event dispatcher, which is what we bound to, which is the close clicked. So that way when you click the button, it lets the pop-up here know, hey, I'm closing it. So how do we get all the information actually into our widget? Well, that is where we're passing along our email variable. When you create a variable inside of a user interface widget, you have an option called expose on spawn. When this is checked, that is going to unlock this right here when you create your widget. So by having this variable called emails with expose on spawn and then hooking it up into here, when I create this widget, it's going to pass along this variable, and I have all my emails, which I created in design time, passed along to my widget itself. So what I do is I just simply take those emails, put them into a loop, split apart my email content, pass it over to my header widget, and then populate my email. So you may be asking about these widgets and headers and why I have all these variables. Well, how it's designed is you have 2 structures, one for email, one for messages. Structures are basically just containers that hold variables. So I created one called email struct that holds the sender, the header, and the content. Then what I did is when we have our blueprint here with an email variable, I set it to be editable. And then if we go into here to our actual blueprints here, this blueprint in our world has an email section where we created our emails. So let's say, for example, we wanted a new email. Well, we just hit plus. We'll have this one come from, well, this one call from Bill. And the header's going to be get rich quick. Let's make a spam. And then, your content will be, this is a great way to get rich quick. And then we'll end it. Now, if we run this, and I actually go over here and interact with our email, we'll find, boom, a new email. I broke this. This is why this isn't working right now. Let's see if we can actually fix that. Let's see. So, how did I break that? What did I do? That is a good question. Well, I guess we'll do a little bit of real-time debugging here to figure out what I broke, because I apparently broke something. Is it in my structure? Okay, let's hit play and let's see if we can figure out what I broke, because I'm going to have to fix it anyways. So anyways, when you click on the new email, which you saw was really quick to add, it automatically added it to our setup. So all you had to do, we'll fix this in a second. Let me finish what I was explaining. So all you have to then do is simply have your blueprint for your email or messages, and then edit in real time in the editor what you want it to show. And that is how you can add or remove emails really simple. So the nice thing about this is if you created this blueprint and you gave it to your game designers, they can just simply edit these things in real time in the system, and you won't have to program anything special. Now, like I said earlier, keep in mind this is a basic system. It doesn't support images and it doesn't support external editing, but with some effort, you can make it support images, which I did in the messaging one, which I'll show you in a second. Or you could make it support formatting, or you could even have it where someone can edit these things in Excel and then bring them into your system. So, like I said, this is just a generic system. So let's see if we can figure out what I broke. So our issue is we don't have these updating properly, our texts. And if we find, that's going to be our content header, which is going to be this one, which is our text blocks for our content. Oh, no, not content, sorry. That's going to be email header. Let's try that again. Okay, which is our sender and our header. So our sender is getting broken. Our sender variable for email header box is getting broken somehow. This is just our font check, so that's not an issue. They're both set to expose on spawn. So for some reason, our email sender is not being sent over properly to our email header box widget, which means our emails is probably not passing it along properly. So let's check. Let's just debug. That's always fun. Okay. So I should not have stopped it on the actual loop itself. That was not the smart thing to do. Okay. So here's our email array. This is where I should have stopped it. So let's try this in the correct space. Oops. Stop. Widget. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so we have our sender text, our header text, and our index, which of course I'm not debugging, so I really can't see the value, so that does not help. I'm supposed to be creating. I have no idea, honestly, what I broke here, which is highly amusing. So we are, what is wrong here? Is it, it's not our sender that's broken, right? Whoops, let's stop this. Let's debug in real time. It is our sender. So our header is working fine, the content right here. But our sender is broken. So if we print this out and drop this into here. This was completely unintentional, this breaking, but hopefully this helps at least show a debugging process. Bill, Dr. Tran, and George. Okay, so we know that right here that this is being properly pulled over to our header. So when we're creating our header itself, something is not going right. So we are passing along the sender to the sender text in our email header. So in our email header itself, right here, we have our sender text. Our binding got broken. So that was simple enough. We'll go over here, we'll rebind this, and we'll run this again. We'll hit play, and we have our names back. Okay, so see, simple problem, simple fix. A little bit of debugging, we figured it out. So let's see if we can figure out where we were at. So as you can see there, basically we're taking our emails, breaking them apart, creating our header, binding an event, like we bound our close. We're binding an event called header clicked to each of our buttons, which is our header widgets. And then we're adding those interactively to our scroll box in real time. So that's how you saw we were able to create a new email here, and it basically loops through and adds them as a child to here. Adds one child, adds one child, adds one child. So how does this interaction work with this? Well, that's pretty simple. We have an event called clicked on header. And what it does is this little function here. We are passing in the index, which is in our array 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, wherever our emails are. Because keep in mind, I know I keep dropping back and forth, but it's pretty simple. Email 0, email 1, email 2, with all this content. So when we click, we're saying, hey, populate the email content at this index. So it goes through, it says, okay, well, let's remove everything out of that box on the right first. Let's create a new widget. And if you notice, this widget has something called content text. And what we're doing is we're taking our emails, taking the index that we want, taking the content from there, and populating our widget, and then adding it to our scroll box. So in real time, basically, we walk over to our thing and interact with it. When we interact, it looks through our emails and adds a widget, a widget, and a widget. When we click on this widget, it is looking at this widget, saying, what's your index? The widget is telling the index to the program. The program's going, okay, emails. For widget, this number, what is your content? It gets the content, creates a new widget over here, and adds it in here with the content. So it's pretty simple. And then, of course, when we click on the next one of the first steps when it does it over here is it erases it first by clearing the children. So that way we don't have email overlap. So that is how the email pop-up works. And in case you were wondering, for the email pop-up, we have the content and the header, which are just two widgets styled how I want them, a simple text block and a text block. And the content is just a simple text block, and I colored it black. You obviously could style it any text, any size, anything you want to obviously look like you want it. That's the nice part. It's all customizable. Your artist could come in and make everything look like you want it. All that matters here is you have a sender and a header box that are bound to some variables, and you have content that is simply bound to a variable. That's it. Now you may have noticed this monstrosity right here. Well, I kind of wanted it to look better when you came in here and you noticed that you had emails that need to be read, and to give it a little bit of a visual flair when you clicked on it. So like I pointed out earlier, bolded, sender, italicized, topic. You click on it and they both go to normal. What I did was when the header is created, I save the font for the header and I save the font for the sender. You need to save these because we're going to modify them later. And then all I do is when you click on it, is I simply change the font to the same thing as before, except I change the font info to regular. I'd actually want to change this to light. We're going to give it a little bit of a different change here. Just give it a little more of a flair. We'll hit play this time, and you're going to notice when we interact with them, they're going to become much easier to notice which ones you've read, because I'm using a light font now. So there you go. Pretty simple. That's one of the things, though, you need to know is you need to save the font. And then all we're doing is we're using the set font node, passing along. See our original font here. The nice thing, it's a struct, so we break it. And we're just passing along everything except for the font info, which is going to be our light. Because by default, our font here is going to be bold, and our font here is going to be italic. So all we're doing here is changing it from bold to light and italic to light. So it gives that nice little visual effect. So our other one is going to be almost identical, and this is going to be our email. So let's go ahead and pull up our message, not email. So I'm going to skim over this fairly quickly. The first part is going to be identical. It's removing the text, showing interaction when we walk up to it, and hiding interaction when we walk away from it. Same thing here. When we interact with it, we see if we have a widget or not, and then we either create one or destroy one. When we create the widget, you're going to see the same thing. We're passing along our messages array, and we have the same exact things. We wait for it to be clicked on and closed. Our only real difference here is going to be in our message pop-up and our two widgets that go with it. There is a custom widget for the left message box and a custom widget for the right message box. These are what you see when we walk up to the widget and you interact, and you see this is our left message box and this is our right message box. This is our left message box. I'm not an artist, that's why they look kind of like crap. I did the best I could just to give an indication of two different people chatting. So again, everything's completely customized. All it's going to care about is that you have variables set up, a name, a message, and an image that allow you to customize those in the editor. And all the widget does is simply display it however you want. I have an image, I have the name, and then I have what content it's going to be, and then I have this little green border that goes around it. And you're going to notice the right one is going to be the same. I need to change that back to fill screen. There we go. The right one is going to be the same. The only difference is it's aligned to the right with the picture on the right, and it's got a purple border. So the actual message, where'd it go? This one, message pop-up. No, that's not what I wanted. Message pop-up. There we go. Our actual widget itself is going to be very similar to the email, except we only need one scrolling box. Your scrolling box is where we're going to add our text messages. And all it's going to do is, if you look at this monstrosity, which I of course haven't set up with comments, it's going to look very similar, except we're only going to have to loop through once and then set up our message display. Now on this one, what I'm doing is, if we go over here and we go to our message struct, remember email struct contains email information, message struct contains message information, and you'll notice we have a few variables. Is left is a Boolean if it's the left or right person, basically yes or no, the name of the person, the message of the person, and then an image. So when we're actually processing our messages, we do a loop. Well, first thing we do is see, is it the left? If it's the left, we create a left message box. If it's right, we create a white message box. It's a really cheesy and cheap way of doing this. You could have it check on the name, for example, and then create a box. There's so many ways of doing this, but you know what? This is an easy, quick example. And if it works, which as you can see here it does, let's go ahead and use it. The whole point of programming is to get stuff done. And all I'm doing here is passing the name along to my widget, the message text, and the image. And hopefully, and then of course over here, I'm adding it to our scroll box. Hopefully you figured out by now how we add more messages. We simply have our widget here, and then we have our messages array, and all we do is have messages. That's it. So if, let's say, for example, this last one we have is from Marcy, and we wanted a new one. Let's go ahead, and this one's going to be our right person. Actually, you know what? Let's make this one from Marcy again. So it's left. We'll have it be from Marcy, and we're going to have our message, I hate losing. And then we'll assign her image to that little red character, which is, let's copy it and paste it to make it easy. And there we go. And we have that little character. So if you remember, our old conversation was 3 lines. And there we go. There's our new conversation with 4 lines. Obviously, you know, there's lots of things that could be done. In a real text message, it would end up combining this text with this text. But hey, you know what? I spent literally half a day creating this just to show as an example. And it's meant to show interaction between different objects. We're using blueprint interfaces to chat back and forth. We're using a little bit of 3D widget tree here. We're not binding our actual blueprint here to any actual meshes, so it can be designed however you want it. Everything is customizable by your designer instead of your programmer in terms of the messages that are shown. It's you know, pretty good basic here. And these are all of your different widgets and things that are created uniquely for this. A basic material is just so you can see it green, and a UMG material here so that way you can actually, I put the little border on the text here. Other than that, these are the things you need. So let me wrap this up pretty quickly. I'll just do a 2-minute overview of what everything does in case we got really confused. All the source will be available in the link below. If there are any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below and ask. I've set it up where we have 2 blueprints, one designed for email, one designed for messaging. The messaging one relies upon a message left and right widget, along with the actual message pop-up itself, which is the background and where everything's stored. The email one relies on the email pop-up, along with the header, which is our left side, and our content, which is the right side. Emails are composed of an email structure for each email. Messages are composed of a message structure for each message. Interactable is simple blueprint interface I'm using to determine if an object is interactable with. The interactable object is the actual collision box volume that you see here. It's going to be this one right here, which is your interactable object collider. Your text renderer is your text renderer, so that contains your text. And then your message collider is the box outside that shows when the message is coming on your screen. So let's do the real quick little example to show how I would set one up. I'm going to go ahead and drag over a little platform again. Let's go ahead and we'll put a sphere in here. We're going to make this like this really cool little, we'll make it a round computer terminal. There we go. Yeah, let's go with that. It's an old iMac or something weird looking. Okay, so we have that. Let's go ahead and make this one an email. So we'll drop this in to our system. Let me go and rotate this around to make it easier to see. And we'll line it up just to start with like that. Okay, so actually right now as this is, it could be usable. If I walked into this and walked closer, we'd see interact. We'd walk out. If I click on it, we'd see a blank email system. We want it, let's make it a little better. We could click on the interact word, go to our text renderer. Let's go ahead and drop this down a little bit. And we'll make it a little bit smaller, something like that. And let's make it 14. And you know what? Actually would be kind of cool. Let's go ahead and move this forward and down. Is that way too far forward? Let's try something like that. And let's go and rotate it maybe a little bit like that and pull it back out. And let's see what that looks like. Nope, and that is really hard to see. So maybe let's see. Oh, this is going to be hard to work on. Yeah, the text rendering, because of the default text material, is not... The default text material is interacted with the light rather than being a emissive material. So that is one issue that you run into if you don't change it. But let's see what happens if we do that. You know, like I said, we're just screwing around here. Yeah, why not? You know what? It doesn't have to be perfect. This is just an example. So we made a little bit of text there, and it's got a little bit of an angle, and it's in front of our little sphere, and it shows what we're working on. And if you notice, clicking over here, nothing's happening. Clicking on the sphere, it happens. That's because my interaction box is this little cube right here, which of course you can interactable object, and maybe we want to move this here, And maybe we want to make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, I think width is good enough. Move it back a little bit. Let's make it a little bit thicker in the other direction. I think it was this way, right? Yeah. And we'll make it a little bit shorter. We'll try that. See, now we're making it where it's more of an interactable on this square, the circle itself. See how it's not hitting when they're on the sides, but hitting there? So there we go. We set up our little platform. Now we have our actual object selected. Let's add an email. Let's add 2 emails here. And we'll do the senders from before. We'll do a sender from Billy. He wants more money. You know, get rich now. You know, don't ignore my last email. It was real. And then we'll get another one from Mom. It's your birthday, so we'll say happy birthday. And she says, you know, I love you. I can't believe you never call me anymore. And of course, spelling with a microphone in front of me always works great. So there we go. It was 2 emails popped in. We'll go ahead and wander over here, interact, and there we go. Billy's telling me to get rich now. Don't ignore my last email. It was real, K, and of course, spelling incorrect. And then Mom saying happy birthday and wishing we would actually call her. And of course, it works. The close works. Everything works. It was really simple and easy. That is how this message pop-up thingy works. I hope somebody learned something from this. I hope it was useful as a base project. Remember, all the code will be below. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below.